suave gambler Aventurine rolls right into the meta, bringing with him a whole lot of deceitful charm. And today, I'm gonna be telling you how to build him best. Let's get into it. Listen, this man's the hottest gambler around, so it's only natural that some of us want to build him as the snazziest sub-DPS. 4-piece Diver is gonna be the best buying for your chip. Aventurine has a debuff in his burst, and if you play him along with other debuffers, you can make use of a 2-piece damage increase. The 4-piece also just provides him with a boatload of stats, which you can never go wrong with. There's no 4-piece that specifically converts death into some kind of damaging stat, so a more general set like this is perfect for him. Otherwise, good old 4-piece Genius is one heck of a brilliant star for him. Anyways, this will be a second best option if enemies are quantum weak. You get the extra 10% def ignore even if Aventurine is dealing imaginary damage, so it's like a universal debuff on enemies. Though when you're fighting enemies that don't feature a quantum weakness, well then this set's performance kinda plummets. It's good but sorta conditional. 4-piece Wastelander is very solid on him, ironic considering where the man grew up. And this considers if you manage to imprison the enemies. Also ironic. Enough throwing shade. Point is, this is a good set. It's good for the simple reason that you get imaginary bonus percent and crit stats. You can't ask for anything more. With Aventurine, due to how Star Rail has such a little amount of specialized relics, you just want to aim for what has the most valuable stats. In terms of mixed combos, you can throw 2-piece imaginary percent, diver, and def percent to get the most value out of his damage. Purity Palace is pretty balls in terms of DPS. He wants def for his crit conversion, yes, but it's significantly weaker than diver. 2-piece sets include 2-piece Salsato for the 15% follow-up attack damage. You also get some ult damage buffs, which is awesome considering he does some DPS there too. 2-piece Sigonia is really solid if you can fully stack it, which is easy in pure fiction. I'd avoid this set in MOC though. 2-piece Bellabog can have a positive effect on his damage if you're farming Salsato for him, but can't seem to get lucky. It'll suffice until you get what you want. And 2-piece Keel is entirely more of a supportive set, which does sacrifice some of his own damage, but at least the crit applies to him too. Even so, this is more for team-wide damage. Nice bonus is that since Aventurine gives himself so much effect res, you can immediately proc Keel. 2-piece Pinakuns also works if you're playing with Mr. Daniel Lunar, or SAS per Kippy. Note that this is only like a 1-2% increase over just using Keel, and it's more like a, hey, this is nice if you have it kind of pick. In terms of main stats, they're simple. Go for a crit damage body, def percent or speed boots, def percent or imaginary percent orb, and a def percent rope. When it comes to the defense percent versus imaginary percent orb, imaginary percent does about 15% more damage than a defense percent orb, but a def orb will still serve you fine and is more comfortable in terms of gameplay. However, if you're using a light cone which doesn't offer you much defense, then you want to use a def orb to make up for the lost stats. Light cones like this include Destiny Threads or Lando's Choice. For stub stats, go for this. He gets 50% effect res already, but you can go for a little more as it isn't 100%. Can always use some more beef. Speed isn't overly important as you can get away with him on def boots. This is because most of his damage share comes from his follow-up attacks. He mostly builds stacks from his shields getting hit or other characters moving, so his own movements aren't that important. You'd only want him to go if you want more skill points or opportunities to refresh your shield on him, but it's not a terrible stat to have. The crit damage body is thanks to him getting crit rate and specific for free out of his kit, and generally I recommend opting for defense percent boots, but you can pick speed over defense percent, if you're content with the amount you have and want a little more skill points. Okay, cool, but what if you had the survivability of a wet noodle and want to play him as a purely defensive unit? Well, my dear cup noodles, his build is fairly easy to grasp. He wants to use 4-piece Purity Palace for the defense percent while also letting his shield absorb more damage. It's the no-brainer pick for him, and you can farm it next to the Quantum set if you ever felt like changing to a sub-DPS Aventurine. 2-piece sets will consist of def percent or imaginary percent. Aventurine doesn't need a whole lot of stats, man simply needs defense and he's good to go. 2 pieces are easy, go for Bellabog. This is nice since it's paired with his best sub-DPS set, Salsato. Sigonia is mid when playing a purely defensive Aventurine, and Keel is solid for team-wide support, but you don't get any extra defensive benefits here. 2-piece Pinakuns works here too, he gets a tiny amount of ER which is welcome. His main stats don't change that much, just use a defense percent body over crit percent body this time, since you want the max amount of shield beats that you can get. Substats stay relatively the same, just less emphasis on the crit stats and go more for def percent. Chances are you'll build some crit anyway due to how little stats defensive Aventurine needs to get going, also considering that he's dirt cheap to build on the whole. After all, he only needs a penny to rake it all in. It's all or nothing. With the rankings, all of these were calced with a def percent orb over an imaginary percent orb. You can't go wrong with any of these sets as there's a benefit to farming all of them. I recommend the sub DPS setup over a defensive setup, as his damaging aspects are pretty much his gimmick. He was designed with this build in mind, so it's more than enough sustain to build him like this. A purely defensive Aventurine is also great though. Don't feel any shame in going down this route if you're out of luck and or get tired of gambling with enemy RNG and MOC. The real RNG in this game, however, is whether the AI is actually going to use Pella like someone who isn't insane. Okay, we've covered Blonde Child's Relics. What flavors of light cone does he consume? S1 Unjust Destiny is a light cone with an extremely sick name, while also having a mega epic passive. You get a crazy amount of defense percent with this, as if he wasn't already super easy to build. The extra crit damage also helps him deal more damage, and it only gets better from there. This little guy has a few qualities. First, the debuff it adds on enemies counts as an Acheron stack, so you can stack her up a lot more consistently with Aventurine. Also, his follow-up attack hits every enemy on the field, so they all get a debuff, not just one. This light cone is actually insane for him, not a bad pickup, but remember this is kinda niche and will only be good for him. S1 Moment of Victory also goes extraordinarily hard. Yeah, you don't need the EHR, but the 48% free def percent is fantastic considering how much free defense keeps rolling Aventurine's way. Wow, what a lucky guy. The taunt value being increased on him is also pretty great. He'll take hits a lot better than other party members. Plus, when Aventurine himself gets hit, he gets another blind bet spot attack as opposed to anyone else only giving him one. Of course, most enemies have some form of an AoE attack, so position him next to your beefier party members if you can. This is because the aggro is going to draw those AoE attacks towards him, and then the blast will hit your beefier teammates. All this free def will also give him more of that solid crit conversion. Plus, the more he's hit, the more follow-up attacks he can deal. S5 Destiny's Threads is a solid choice. A bit of effect res is always welcome, and increasing damage dealt is a good buff to his own DPS. It doesn't have any huge team-wide benefits, but hey, it's a good sub-DPS cone. Plus, it's free while also being his third best cone for damage, so hey free-to-plays, you're in luck. Speaking of which, Aventurine is my favorite free-to-play gacha player of everyone at E6 S5. S5 Concert for 2 feels so convenient for Aventurine considering he's a team-wide shielder. It gets better with more super impositions. As it stands now, it's just solid at S1. Usable for sure. It actually becomes stronger than Destiny if you're playing Aventurine on an imaginary orb, though it's more comfortable and still high damaging to use a defense percent orb. S5 This Is Me is also pretty effective. The only really benefits Aventurine's burst. The effect only applies to one enemy, but it's ult is single target anyway, so it's not a huge problem. For a gacha cone though, I'd rather just go for Destiny's Threads, as it's a better sub-DPS option. That's also free. This one's kinda meh as a defensive only option. S5 Lando's Choice is a great light cone for a purely defensive Aventurine, though it can also work for a sub-DPS as it increases his taunt value. That's pretty important considering getting hit equals more stacks, though it's weaker damage-wise than some of the other choices I mentioned. It does experience a similar phenomenon to Moment of Victory, where if Aventurine gets himself hit as opposed to anyone else, he gains one more blind bet stack. S5 Day 1 of My New Life gives out some defense percent, which is good, but after looking at all the light cone options thus far, is it that impressive to have def percent when there are much better free options? The all-type res of everyone increases, which is aight, but it's nothing to sweat over. S5 Trend of Universal Market sacrifices so much of Aventurine's own damage, but it allows him to build more Acheron stacks. His signature does a much better and quite frankly a more harder hitting job at this, but if you don't have or don't want it, then hey, this is here and it's not half bad. Texture of Memories may be from the Herda shop, but I feel like I just ate a suspicious sandwich from a corner shop in the middle of nowhere that's been abandoned for 13 years when I look at that passive and imagine Aventurine wearing it. Like, some damn suspicious goop, my dude. As for cones which suck on a damaging Aventurine but are viable when you switch to shielder only Aventurine, there's one that pops up. She already shut her eyes, because your favorite character is mid. Once again, all calc with the def percent orb in mind, keeps it fair for all cones. His damage can be pretty solid if you focus on it, otherwise like I said earlier, no shame in setting up the ultimate shield if you keep perishing Eidolons style. First, let's address the giant white pillar soon to land upon the fools in this room, the IRS. IRS team consists of the math teacher you wish you had, a debt collector, and the debt collector's cute side companion Topaz, Cat Abandoner, and Mr. Gamba. The IRS team is amazing for Aventurine, he fits it like a glove. Firstly, Persepiman and Topaz do follow-up attacks all day, all night, and Aventurine will build up follow-up stacks like it's nobody's business. Annihilation in Simulated Universe is going to be insane with these guys. Sparkle is on the money telling Aventurine to figure out what the Laughter wants, cause this damage is just comically good. Also, you can opt to use Pinakuns on Aventurine in this team as Persepi benefits from it, though if you opt for Keel then that buffs Topaz too. I'd recommend Keel in this case. Ruin My Taxes is here for her team-wide buffing. She benefits everyone here, and the team-wide buffing she provides is strong. Better than any other choice here. Plus, her ult counts as a debuff. This contributes to both Aventurine and Ratio's 4-piece diver stats. Great cake. 4-piece diver also does swimmingly in this team. Ahaha. Pain. That's because there's so many debuff sources. Ratio's effect res debuff, Topaz's E debuff, Aventurine's ultimate, and possibly even his light cone if you've got it, and Ruanmei's ult. Truly the IRS, all 5 stars looking to debuff your wallet. This is without a doubt Aventurine Man's most synergistic comp. Also, Ratio is still free and most of you guys should have him, everyone has access. Topaz, not everyone may have her, so you can replace her with Pella or any other debuffer, Harmony, etc. While Ruanmei will be the best here, you can swap her out for Pella too, or any other debuffer. Harmony and a good damage amplifier will be good here. Then, all crit teams are great with Aventurine. Gambler Man goes, it's all or nothing, and increases the amount of crit damage a single enemy can take. Good debuff makes him great for any old crit team. Nice bonus if they include a follow-up attack in their kit. For example, Jing Yuan has one big slow follow-up attack that can give some tiny bonuses to Adventure Man. One comp worthy of notice is Acheron. If Aventurine uses his ult, she gains a stack. His ult doesn't regenerate that fast though, so it'll only be once in a while. Still cool though. And if you don't have his light cone or put him on trend, that's 2 Acheron stacks. This is good, it's actually not a bad source of debuffs while still sustaining your team. Every other crit team will be fine, just sticking with a DPS, use that DPS's respective supports, and put this snazzy fella on the end. The only teams where he's just kinda tacked on for the sake of it is DOT teams. I'm specifically talking about the Kafka Swan combo. My main deal with these two is that Ho-Ho is just so much better for them. Kilo's bad in DOT teams because Yukami-Sato art don't crit in them, unless you're as insane as Kafka. So putting Ho-Ho on 2-piece Penacony is actually a very good increase for Black Swan, as your only other method of team-wide buffing here is using something like 2-piece Ageless, which is good, but Ho-Ho's burst already has attack buffing, so you can get the best of both worlds. Also, consider how Kafka wants Glamoth and it's already paired with Penacony, you can see where this is going. Not to mention 4-piece hacker space on Ho-Ho. Black Swan and Kafka both have an incredible need for speed. The only real negative of Ho-Ho is skill points, but that's not much better with Aventurine either. Okay, that's enough Ho-Ho glazing. Point is, you'd only add him for elemental coverage. You know, for imaginary damage in the team. But I find that a little weird to do here. As of all comps, I think this duo needs it the least. There's plenty of electric weak enemies who aren't wind weak, and vice versa. One can always cover the other, and breaks in DOT teams tend to be super strong, especially with Ruanmei. Aventurine's crit damage taken buff also doesn't have any effect. Res, haha. I suck in these comps. Typically. I hope they don't. If you're building Crit Kafka, expect me to lurk near your abode. However, there is a silver lining here. Using Aventurine's Light Cone offers a huge AoE debuff to apply upon enemies, which is really sick. Kafka and Swan are very AoE units, so this benefits them a lot. TLDR, if you have Aventurine's Light Cone, yeah, he's good in dot. Otherwise, he's just kind of standing next to these guys, asking them how the weather is, which to that, he'll answer his own question and make it rain money. Aventurine is the luckiest free-to-play in the world. He says, it's Gamba time. Then he rolls the dice and E6s himself in one 10-pull. A legend, wow. He then goes to you and says, 99.9999999% of gamblers quit before hitting it big, you know. And then you go, it's Eidolon time. So what are they like? His E1's pretty much Fushuan quality, if not a bit better. 10% crit damage is traded off for more defensive utility. It doesn't really increase his own damage by much since it's a team-wide buff. Now Aventurine's E2 is even more generous. When he basic attacks, he reduces the enemy's all-type res for 3 turns. Awesome. Roughly a 4 to 5% damage increase for him. E3 levels his ult in basic. A little weird that his follow-up attack isn't leveled at this stage, but I digress. His E4 grants him a bunch of defense percent and some more hits to his follow-up attack. This is a big jump in his own damage. He's at 164% of his potential here. At E5, he gets his follow-up attack and skill increased, granting him a further 10% damage increase. Great stuff. His E6 really hones into a sub-DPS gimmick. and this gives him a 50% damage increase for every other party member with a shield, so not including himself, up to 150%. Obviously massive. He's now 382% of his maximum damage potential. That sounds like it's way too much, but consider that he's a sub DPS, and this E6 gets him to DPS levels. If you're wondering whether you should get E1 or S1, I would say S1 is better. Only go for Eidolons if you want to go for E2. His E1 is nice, but I would say it's more like a cool lucky bonus if you happen to pick it up. His S1 also makes him incredible in far more teams with a lot more flexibility, and will turn him into the ultimate nuclear tank. Honestly, just go for E6. It's all or nothing! For IPC reasons, that's a joke. Don't get into debt with Numby, he'll send Topaz after you. Best Boy is seriously the most high value sustain in the meta right now, if you ask me. In terms of raw sustain, if you build him as an absolute tank, I don't think he falls that short of Fu Xuan. But our sustain can be kinda overkill, and I say that Aventurine was tuned just right and will be one of the most useful solo sustains you can possibly get. If you don't already have a 5-star sustain or only have one, pick up Aventurine. He's also a solid upgrade to Japard, though ideally you can use them both in different teams. I do recommend him if you're still on the hunt for good sustains. Undeniably hot, but with heartbreaking lore to boot. At first I thought he'd be the type to be a Chad on Roblox, but it turns out he was playing prison life all along. This has been Juice, signing out. But wait, thanks to Aventurine, I've learned so many important life lessons. One really struck me in particular. The next time I see buy 2 for £1.50 cream egg deal, it's all or